Dr. Shankar Sharma. He was vice pre- vice chair vice chair of Planning Commission, and Dr. Bimal Koirala. He was the person. He was the first bureaucrat. I think he has presented budget in Nepalese history of Nepal. He is the only one person who has read the budget speech. I think so. He has that honor to present the budget in Parliament of Nepal. And Haribhakta Sharma, he is one of the leading businessmen. He's never even in controversy, and he is a really good person. I know him very well. Now I'd like to directly go up and discussion. Dr. Sharma, you are in Planning Commission and you are in as ambassador. You have served nation in different capacity. You have instrumental developing planning of Nepal, and you are helping Nepal in different forum, with a different capacity. Now, since we have seen 14 our plan, 14 plan, but the fruits of the development has not been shared by bottom of pyramid. Still, people at the bottom of pyramid has not seen the development and get the fruits of the development also. Is this a problem of what is the problem, main problem of development? Is it we don't have committed leader, or we don't have resources for development?
Thank you, moderator. This is a great question. I think I have to summarize what has happened over the last several decades, and then 15th plan, coming to the 15th plan. But there were ups and downs. Nepal is always in transition. Having said that, we are also suffering. We also suffered from conflict, instability, and number of things. But if you go to the bottom of the problem, I'll say three major things. One is lack of accountability at the level of implementers. I think talking about implementers, it's basically both the leadership as well as political leadership as well as the bureaucrats. So anything related with the accountability, so what are the components, different components of accountability? I'll say two basic things. Incentives related with rewards and punishment or penalties. I think we have seen the statements coming from bureaucrats against the political leaders, having their long list of expectation and wish list, but not talking realistically. And similarly, I think we have seen in the newspaper a couple of days ago, the Prime Minister disappointed with the secretaries on some of the things that he was about to monitor about the targets of some of the milestones. So lack of rewards, punishment linked with incentive system and accountability. And the second one is, I'll say, resources, no doubt about that. But talking about the resources, I'll say it's more than resources, it's the efficiency of utilization of the resources. I'll just give you two examples. This fiscal year, if we see the economic survey published by the Ministry of Finance, the capital expenditure compared to last year has increased, but government's contribution to capital formation has gone down. I think it's negative. So the efficiency improvement in the government is very, very important. But if we come to the private sector, and then if we see the publications from APO, Asian Productivity Organization, most of the companies in Nepal, I think their productivity has remained almost nil, zero, meaning that I think they have not been very innovative in bringing the new technology and improving the productivity of their companies, especially the private sector. I think these are the two major issues, but in the meantime, I'll say broadly, if we are talking about the governance issues, the institutional part, very weak and inadequately strengthened institutions, and also the capacity of the bureaucrats to some extent. The reason is that They are transferred every 9 months, 1 year, from the Ministry of Culture to Ministry of Industry and Commerce, and from there to Ministry of Environment. And then how can they develop their expertise in the respective areas? So I think in summarizing, three things: accountability, institutions and capacity, and effectively utilizing the resources rather than, yes, we have problem with the resources, no doubt about that. If we see the SDGs targets, and then if you really calculate the estimated figure for today, we really need a lot of resources. Not only that, I think even to achieve 8.5% growth rate, but the efficiency part is really that we need to focus more on. Thank you.
Okay. So it's the efficiency that is required. Now we have done a lot of political reform, though we'll talk about economic reform a little while from now. But we have changed our government structure. We from central government, we have divided it to the provincial government and local government. Now the issue of decentralization is there. So how do you think that decentralization should be 100% or it should be guided with the principle? So guided decentralization is required, or is a full-fledged decentralization is required for Nepal? Looking at the governance issue and this kind of less educated leaders, basically leaders, those who are in bottom of pyramid, like in local government, they do not have even adequate financial knowledge about how things should be done. They should be doing implementing budget or implementing things. So what do you think about that?
I think I would like to go for full decentralization. The reason is that to some extent I was also involved in, I think, in the group which was drafting the constitution. So the whole idea of the federalism in Nepal is that I think if we give more authority to the municipalities and provinces level, they can identify the priority, they can develop, they can accelerate the growth, they can do a lot of things, because that was the complaint we received when we did the decentralization a long time ago. So we didn't really implement the decentralization in full terms. So yes, but looking at the budgets, the priority that has been provided by different provinces and municipalities as of now, I think there are serious issues, especially on the fiscal decentralization. In some of the municipalities, they are doing quite good. They have identified their priority projects, but the main problem with that also is they cannot only talk about the priority issue. They also have to talk about the needs and projects of each and every ward and ward chairman. I think that has become a big political problem in most of the municipalities, looking into the budget system and the prioritization they have done over the last 2 years. Now coming back to the provincial level, I think there's even more serious problem. What we have found out, I think probably, I don't want to name any provinces. If you see the newspaper today, some of the provinces, they even didn't have their the provincial parliament running, mainly for the reason that the parliamentarians are complaining that they didn't have enough money to spend in their constituency, that's number one, and they didn't have enough projects in their constituency. So I think these are some of the problems. And the third problem, what I have seen is, in most of the provinces, ministers, they would like to keep the money to themselves, not allocate these money to different programs in the budget. So meaning that we call it, I think in Artha Mantralaya, it's a very popular word called abanda. So they would like to keep the lump sum amount in the project, in the ministry, and then published it in the red book, and they would like to spend on their own with their wish list. I think that tendency has been increasing. And the last point, what I have seen is, I think there is also the problem at the federal level. Even this year, meaning that for the next fiscal year, the federal government has transferred some of the projects from the federal government, which will cost only 60,000 rupees. Meaning that these projects are not under, let's say, equalization grant, but they are under the provincial government's projects, meaning that if the federal government is doing 60,000 rupees worth of project in province X, then why don't they do 50,000 projects by themselves? So I think that has also derailed some of the issues related with the fiscal federalism in Nepal. But more than that, I think misappropriation, fiduciary risk, we have not even evaluated at this point of time. But I think we probably will have more problem. And then if the Ministry of Finance, the government, federal government will not act now, then we can have even more problem. But still, I will say that I will support the full decentralization. Thank you.
Yes, there are weakness in governance with the government part, and even in the maybe some there are lots of red tapeism. When we start a business, we face lots of problems to get approval also. Now I'd like to come to Dr. Bimal Koirala. I'll talk about looking at the background of political reform we have done from last many years, that we have seen different kinds of democracy in Nepal. But the finance sector reform has started from 1990, but we have not been able to achieve the target, and we have not yet still have not achieved the goal, entire goal we have achieved. Yes, the finance sector reform is not done in a vacuum. It's clearly linked with condition and they each want certain result. But since you are in the finance ministry for many years, and you have been the chairman of Nepal Bank Limited also, you know the problem of Nepal Bank Limited. The finance sector has suffered, and they have come out from the finance. They have recovered from the bad loan, everything, whatever is there. So how do you feel Nepal has initiated finance sector, and what should be the ideal target? What achievement we have made till date? And looking at the optimism of the banking sector, which I think for last 80 years, if you look at the last 75 years, the total risk assets portfolio was $13 billion US. Within these 5 years, the risk assets almost doubled to 28 billion. So how can we achieve the sustainable economy with the next economic reform, that which is required now?
Thank you, Anandji. The question you posed here is very pertinent. These are the pressing issues of financial sector in the country. In fact, financial industry in this country is relatively young if you compare to the other countries in the world. Since its establishment in Bikram Sambat 1994, it was almost unregulated for several years. After the establishment of Nepal Rashtra Bank, the central bank, financial industry was more or less started regulating by the government, but the financial industry was almost government owned, and 4 entities were there at that time: Nepal Bank Limited, Rashtriya Banijya Bank, NIDC, which is no more in existence, and ADBL. These 4 financial institutions were transacting with the people and lending, borrowing, and taking deposits. All these industries were less regulated, and they were almost monopolizing the financial management and financial system in the country. If we look at, from that time till 1985, financial sector was running, but with more conventional ways. It was not practiced as per the international norms and standards. And in the mid-80s, when IMF and World Bank, they showed their concern in the structural adjustment program, then we started opening our eyes also that unless we regulate financial sector properly, we we will not be able to allocate financial resources efficiently and productively. We will not be achieving growth as targeted. And in a situation of financial repression, naturally growth will be retarded. IMF and World Bank paper showed concern in 3 areas of financial sector. Others were also there, but they were related to economic and other sectors, but 3 major. First was shadow exchange rate they talked about. Nepal Rashtra Bank and the government at that time exchange rate against US dollar was around 12 rupees, but easily transacted in 20, 22 rupees in the market. The shadow exchange rate created a great distortion in the market, and it was very difficult for the borrowers to borrow money and get their resources in US dollar. It was extremely difficult at that time, and market was almost distorted. And second was the financial repression. The interest rate was fixed by the government, and it was very high interest rate, almost around 20% for the borrowers to borrow money from these banks. And the banks were just calculating on the basis of what they were transacting. And there was no competition. It was almost a cartel of these banks together with government that was dictating the financial sector. That was the situation, and at that time, IMF and World Bank paper opened our eyes. They showed their concern, and at that time, for the government, had just 2 choices. First, to remain in the status quo, or to move towards gradual reform. And government didn't afford to go for a status quo, since it was almost on the verge of economic collapse at that time. Therefore, decided to go for gradual reforms and adjusted the exchange rate, adjusted the interest rate, and allowed banks to fix their interest rate as per their profit and loss, whatever, as per their balance accounts. And then government decided to make financial sector, the financial industry, open to the foreign investors. And competition be injected there. This competition will create a vibrant financial sector. That was the motive of the government at that time. And it opened, and the private sector, especially foreigners, they responded quickly. And you see, you know the history, the Arab Bank came, Indo-Suez came, ANZ came, which is now called as
Lobbying towards a big merger. Maybe that's one of the basic agenda for the reform. And I like to come to Mr. Aribaktaji. I always see you smiling, and the interest rate is going up every day. And after you survive major earthquake, you survive insurgency, business is doing very well, and your business, private business is very resilient, and they are working, and they are paying their loan, and they are very obedient borrower. And how do you survive in this, despite of all odds, and how can you smile every time? So can you give me the answer?
Thank you, Arnold. Thank you very much. I can see many of the colleagues are having post-launch glycemic effect. So let us switch over to the language. I don't see any foreigner here in this also. म नेपालीमा भन्छु है तपाईहरुलाई. नेपालको बिजनेसहरु रेजिलिएन्ट छ. नेपालीहरु एक हिसाबले हामी गोर्खालीहरु अलि वारियर टाइपकै मान्छे हौ. व्यवसाय पनि तानतुन गरेर गरिहाल्छौं, काम राम्रो गर्छौं. राम्रो गर्ने मान्छेहरुले जहिले सुकै दुख पाउँछ. दुईजना विद्वानहरु यहाँ हुनुहुन्छ. राम्रो गरेपछि देशमा दुख पाइन्छ, त्यसकारणले हामी प्रिपेयर्ड छौं. राम्रो गर्ने, दुख पाउने, काम अगाडि बढ्ने. बैंकिङ सेक्टरको कुरा आएको छ. फाइनान्शियल सर्भिस मार्केटको इन जनरल मैले देखेको दुईटा फन्डामेन्टल हो. प्राइभेटाइजेसन गर्न दिनुभयो उहाँहरुले, त्यसले गर्दाखेरि प्राइभेटले इफिसिएन्सी ल्यायो, इनोभेसन ल्यायो, अवेलेबिलिटी बढ्यो, लोन पनि धेरै हदसम्म प्राइभेट सेक्टरको ब्याङ्कहरूले अलि एग्रेसिभली दियो, त्यसले इकोनोमीमा एउटा पोजिटिभ इम्प्याक्ट परेको छ। यो हाम्रो माओवादी जनयुद्ध कालमा भएको समस्यालाई पनि त्यो फन्ड फ्लोले फाइदा गरेको। एक्सेस टु फाइनेन्स हेभ इम्प्रुभ भेरी मच। म पञ्चायत कालमा उद्योग खोल्नलाई लाइसेन्स दिनलाई 2-3 वर्ष युङ हुँदै धेरै दुःख पाएको मान्छे हुनाले मैले के देख्छु त्यो बेला पैसा लिनलाई पनि यति गाह्रो थियो कि त नेपाल ब्याङ्क कि त एनआइडिसी। उद्योग खोल्ने मान्छे जाने त्यही माथि त्यो वाणिज्य ब्याङ्कमा अझ पाइने। नेपाल ब्याङ्क र एनआइडिसीबाट अलिअलि उद्योग धन्दाको लोन पाइन्थ्यो, त्यो पनि बडा मुस्किलले पाइन्थ्यो। प्राइभेट सेक्टर आएपछि पाइएको छ र त्यसमा लगानी बढेको छ। लगानी सँगसँगै मैले हेर्दा अहिले वान अफ द बेस्ट क्वालिटी जब इफ यु हेभ क्रिएटेड एनिवेयर इन दिस कन्ट्री इट इज इन द फाइनेन्सियल सर्भिस मार्केट, थ्याङ्क्स टु पिपल लाइक यु। तपाईँहरूले गर्दा भएको, तपाईँहरूले रिस्क लिनुहुन्छ, जनताको पैसा ल्याउनुहुन्छ, चलाउनुहुन्छ। अब समस्या के हो? राष्ट्रबिन्दु कोही हुनुहुन्छ भने कृपया म उहाँलाई अनुरोध गर्न चाहन्छु अलि यसलाई लिबरल बनाइदिनुहोस्। हामी रेगुलेसन त गरौँ डाक्टर साहब, चाहिने भन्दा बढी रेगुलेट गरौँ। यु आर नट गिभिङ भेन्टिलेसन टु द इन्डस्ट्रिज। फाइनेन्सियल सर्भिस इन्डस्ट्री पनि भेन्टिलेट गर्नै पाएको छैन। तपाईँले दिनुहुन्छ एउटा क्रेडिट कार्ड, मैले यहाँ बाहेक अन्त चलाउन पाउँदिनँ। हाम्रा छिमेकी भुटान, बङ्गलादेश, भारतको कुरा नगरौँ, चीनको कुरा नगरौँ, पाकिस्तान जस्तो देश जहाँ चाहिँ अहिले डलर क्राइसिस छ त्यहाँ पनि लोकल कार्ड लगेर जुरिकमा रेस्टुरेन्टमा खाना खान पाइन्छ। यु क्यान स्टिल ह्याभ फुड देयर, यु क्यान युज योर क्रेडिट कार्ड। अब तपाईँले छापेर दिएको क्रेडिट कार्ड मलाई तपाईँलाई रेगुलेट गरे हुनाले नेपाल र भारतमा बाहेक चल्दैन। भारतमा पनि जानुभयो भने रेस्ट्रिक्सन छ, दिनमा यतिभन्दा बढी खर्च गर्न पाउँदैन। द मोर यु कन्ट्रोल द्याट वे द मोर इकोनोमी डिग्रोज। तपाईँले लिबरल इकोनोमिक प्रिन्सिपललाई मान्ने हो भने लिबरल भएर जानु पर्यो। कन्ट्रोल इकोनोमीको यो रेजिम जुन छ नि हाम्रो, यसलाई हामीले चाँडै सुधार्नुपर्छ। किनकि नेपालीहरूले कमाएको पैसा कोरियामा 40,000 मान्छे काम गर्छन्, जापानमा अहिले नै 20-30 हजार मान्छे काम गर्छन्, अर्को 1-2 लाख जाने सम्भावना छ। 20औं लाख मान्छे मिडल इस्टमा, मलेसियामा या अरू कन्ट्रिजहरूमा काम गर्छन्। तिनीहरूको त्यो नेपाल आउन सक्ने डलरको भ्यालु हेऱ्यो भने मलाई लाग्छ 1/3 पनि हाम्रो सिस्टममा आइरहेको। किन आइरहेछ? किन मान्छेले हुन्डीलाई यति धेरै प्राय? किनकि हामी चाहिने भन्दा बढी कन्ट्रोल गरिरहेको छौँ। एभ्रिवेयर वी आर कन्ट्रोलिङ। पिपल डु नट ह्याभ फेथ अन द सिस्टम। मेरो डलर जति सबै मैले पठाइदिएँ भने मैले भोलि ल्याउनै सक्दिनँ होला भन्छ मान्छे। त्यस कारणले धेरै केयरफुल कसियस भएको छ। त्यस कारण यसलाई लिबरलाइज गरौँ। अब एउटा पेमेन्ट गेटवे छैन हाम्रो देशमा। यति लामो समयसम्म हामीले पेमेन्ट गेटवे चाहियो भनिरहेको छौँ, एउटा पेमेन्ट गेटवे छैन। अब कसलाई भन्न चाहने? कहाँ भन्न चाहने? राष्ट्र ब्याङ्कलाई भन्ने हो, नेपालका ब्याङ्करहरूलाई भन्ने हो। अहिलेसम्म एउटा पेमेन्ट गेटवे छैन। बल्ल बल्ल 3-4 वर्षदेखि नेपाल एसबिआई ब्याङ्कको यहाँ मित्रहरू हुनुहुन्छ, उहाँहरूले अहिले हामीलाई सुविधा दिएर हामी आरटिजिएसमा पेमेन्ट पठाउँछौँ इन्डियामा। नभए त ड्राफ्ट पठाउनु पर्ने बाध्यता छ। बाहिरतिर त्यस्तै समस्या छ। $25,000 भन्दा माथिको सामान चाहिँ एलसी खोल्नुपर्छ। 50,000 भन्दा माथि भएपछि बीसीआई रिपोर्ट माग्नुपर्छ। डाक्टर साहब, डु यु नो हाउ मच इट कस्ट टु गेट अ बीसीआई रिपोर्ट फ्रम अ गुड कम्पनी? हाउ मच इट कस्ट? टेल मी। यु हेभ टु नो इट, देन यु हेभ टु हेभ रेगुलेसन। कति पैसा लाग्छ थाहा छ? त्यो नेपालीले कति पैसा तिरिरहेछ? $50,000 जस्तो एउटा आजको दुनियाँमा थोरै पैसामा हामी बीसीआई रिपोर्ट माग्छौँ। एलसी नखोलिकन सामान ल्याउन दिँदैनौँ हामी। यो सबै रेगुलेसन आफ्नो पपुलेसनलाई, आफ्नो व्यवसायलाई कन्ट्रोल मात्रै गर्ने दृष्टिकोणले राखेको हुनाले आवर इकोनोमी इज कस्टली। हाम्रो कस्ट बढै छ। तपाईँले जुन ल्याउनु भयो सप्लाई चेन म्यानेजमेन्टको इस्यु, यी कारणहरूले बढायो। एक त हामी चाहिने भन्दा बढी रिजिड पोलिसीहरू बनायौँ। रिजिड चाहिन्छ, रेगुलेट गरौँ न। ब्याङ्कमा जाउँ, त्यसले ट्याक्स तिरेको छ कि छैन, त्यसले इम्पोर्ट गरेको छ कि छैन, त्यो डकुमेन्टेसन हेरौँ, अनि त्यसको आधारमा पेमेन्ट दिन दिउँ। कसैले क्रेडिट दिन्छु नेपालीलाई भन्यो भने म एउटा उद्यमी हुँ, 500 जना नेपालीलाई काम दिन्छु, सँगै काम गर्छौँ। $25,000 सम्मको सामान क्रेडिटमा ल्याउँछु। कसैले विश्वास गर्यो यो हरिभक्त शर्मासँग सँगै पढाएको थिएँ, यसलाई त म पठाइदिन्छु भन्यो भने हाम्रो सरकारले हुँदैन। त मोराले क्रेडिटमा सामान किन्ने ले। अनि के गर्नुपर्छ? एलसी खोल, टिटी पठाऊ, एडभान्स पठाऊ। जुन मुलुकले आफ्नो व्यवसायलाई आफ्नो नागरिकलाई सम्मान गर्दैन विश्वास गर्दैन त्यो मुलुक बढेकै छैन त्यो कारणले नेपाल यति गरिब रहेको नेपालीहरूको बुद्धि नपुग्यो टु माई राइट साइड आई सी द ब्रिलियन्ट पिपल अन माई लेफ्ट इज वान अफ द मोस्ट सक्सेसफुल चार्टर्ड अकाउन्टेन्ट ब्याङ्कमा तपाईँहरू सबै सफल हुनुहुन्छ देश सफल छैन अनि के तपाईँ हामी देश सफल नबनाइकन जिन्दगी फाल्ने हो तपाईँ हामी मरेर जाँदा गरिब देशकै नागरिक भएर मर्ने हो Is there a way out to do it, to reverse that particular control regime and make it liberal regime? Challenge यहाँ हो यो सबै सेक्टरमा छ फाइनेन्शियल सर्भिस सेक्टरले त अझ तपाईँहरूको स्ट्रेन्थ छ तपाईँसँग रिसोर्स छ मसल छ तपाईँसँग त्यो मसलको प्रयोग गर्नुहोस् हामीहरूलाई लिबरल बनाऊ र नेपालीहरूले कमाएको पैसा आरामसँग डलरमा तपाईँको ब्याङ्कमा ल्याएर राख्न दिउँ त्यसको 30-40% लान पनि दिउँ किन नदिनु रहेछ हामीलाई चाहिँ डलर नपुगेर यस्तो गाह्रो छ त्यो हुन्डीलाई किन प्राथमिकता दिएको सरकारले तपाईँले किन दिए हुन्डीलाई प्राथमिकता छ किनकि तपाईँले यो सबै जति कन्ट्रोल गरिरहनुहुन्छ त्यति हुन्डी बढिरहन्छ जति धेरै टाइट गर्नुहुन्छ त्यति यो बढ्छ त्यस कारणले यो लिबरल सिस्टमलाई अलिकति राइट पर्सपेक्टिभमा हेरौँ दोस्रो यसबाट हामीलाई एडभान्टेज छ एकछिनलाई मानौँ नेपालमा हामीले किन व्यवसाय चलाउन सकेनौँ अघि हाम्रो डाक्टर साहबले भन्नुभयो भ्रष्टाचार छ चीनमा पनि व्यापक भ्रष्टाचार छ रसियामा अझ धेरै छ बङ्गलादेशमा भ्रष्टाचारको नमुनै छ तर इकोनोमी 11% को ग्रोथ छ 12% को ग्रोथ छ भ्रष्टाचार हुँदैमा फेरि इकोनोमी नहुने पनि रहेन रहेछ माथि नजाने भ्रष्टाचार हामी कहाँ के हो भने भ्रष्टाचार मात्रै गर्ने प्रवृत्ति भयो तपाईँले गरेको हुँदैन मलाई मात्रै गर्नु त्यो प्रवृत्तिको विरुद्धमा म मात्रै राख्नुपर्छ मैले मात्रै जम्मा गर्नुपर्छ भन्ने प्रवृत्तिको विरुद्धमा काम गर्नुपर्ने छ त्यसबाट बाहिर निस्किन सकियो भने सप्लाई चेन म्यानेजमेन्ट नेपालको लजिस्टिक म्यानेजमेन्ट नेपालको इन्डस्ट्रीको सर्भाइभल ग्रोथ रेट दुइटै अहिले इन्डस्ट्री सर्भाइभ गर्न गाह्रो छ ग्रोथ हुनु पनि गाह्रो छ इमान्दार भएर ग्रोथ गर्न त महाभारत छ अहिले चाहिँ त्यो मान्छेलाई जस्तो पीडा कसैलाई छैन यो मलाई लाग्छ ब्याङ्कर साथीहरूले बुझ्नु भएको छ तपाईँहरूले तपाईँको कर्पोरेट गभर्नेन्स राम्रो छ सबै चिज पब्लिस गर्नुपर्छ सेयर होल्डरलाई खुसी पार्नुपर्ने छ बोर्ड अफ डिरेक्टर्सलाई खुसी पार्नुपर्ने छ सो द्याट यु हेभ टु मेक योर बिजनेस सिस्टम मोर ट्रान्सपरेन्ट एन्ड मोर इफिसियन्ट कमाइ पनि गरेर दिनुपर्ने छ त्यही सेक्टरलाई सबभन्दा बढी रेगुलेसन हुन्छ बिकज एभ्री डे वाट आई सी इज ब्याङ्क साहुकारहरूले चाहिने नचाहिने गर्यो भनेर हरेक दिन हामी त्यो लेखिरहेको हुन्छौँ त्यस कारणले राम्रो गर्नेलाई प्रफिट म्यानेज गर्नेलाई प्रफिट जेनेरेट गर्नेलाई सम्मान गर्ने प्रवृत्ति चाहियो जसले धेरै कमाए नि जुन ब्याङ्कले सबभन्दा राम्रो पर्फर्म गरेको छ उसलाई त नेपालको टप पोलिटिकल लिडरसिपले धेरै धन्यवाद यति धेरै नाफा कमाएर ट्याक्स तिरेछौ अर्को वर्ष डबल नाफा कमाऊ त्यो भनिदिनुपर्छ तपाईँले बढी कमाउनुहोस् बढी राम्रो गर्नुहोस् इफिसियन्सी बढाउनुहोस् धेरै राम्रो गर्नुभएछ बरु तपाईँ म्यानमार जानुहोस् दिल्ली जानुहोस् ब्रान्च खोल्नुहोस् हुनसक्छ भने सब्सिडियरी खोल्नुहोस् चीनमा जानुहोस् साङ्घाईमा खोल्नुहोस् आज नेपालको एउटा ब्याङ्क कहीँ छैन न तपाईँहरू भारत जानुभएको छ न तपाईँ भुटानै जान सक्नु भएको छ न बङ्गलादेश जानुभएको छ सबै चिज कन्ट्रोल गरेर नेपालमै राखेर वेन डु यु लर्न ग्लोबलाइजेसन हाउ डु यु टेक एडभान्टेज फ्रम ग्लोबलाइजेसन हाउ डु वी लर्न ग्लोबल बिजनेस प्र्याक्टिसेस त्यस कारणले अबको रिफर्म तपाईँहरू जस्तो विद्वानहरूले खोल्देऊ भन्नु पर्यो नेपालीहरूलाई बाहिर अब खालि भेडा बाख्रा जस्तो काम गर्न मात्रै गएर एन्टरप्रेनर भएर जान दिउँ न इन्भेस्टर भएर जान म एउटा नेपालको टप चार्टर एकाउन्टेन्ट हुँ म त कहाँ कन्सल्टिङ कम्पनी खोल्छु आई वुड ओपन अ कन्सल्टिङ कम्पनी इन दिल्ली इन बस्टन इन न्युयोर्क अनलजी जान पाएर अनि गाइज आई एम फ्रम नेपाल आई वान्ट टु हायर यु गाइज हु इज द बेस्ट गाइ इन दिस प्लेस इन्टरभ्यू लिनु पाइयोस् न अनि त्यसलाई मेरो हेडक्वार्टर काठमाडौँमा छ बाबु आइज त आई विल गिभ यु बिजनेस क्लास टिकट अनि एउटा ज्याकलाई एउटा टोमलाई एउटा ह्यारीलाई बोलाएर इन्टरभ्यू गर्नुहोस् वाट इज योर स्ट्रेङ्थ वाट इज योर विकनेस कम अन गाइ दिस इज नट द वे बट यु वर्क यु आर नट फिट फर दिस जब मेबी आई निड सम वान एल्स कहिले भन्ने खालि अरूले दिएकोमा अर्काले चाहिँ एनजिओले पठाएकोमा विदेशमा गएर $500 पर डाइम यहाँभित्र हालेर देशमाथि जान्छ त्यस कारणले नभए अलिकति तपाईँ हाम्रो कलेक्टिभ भिजन चाहिएको छ यो देशमा केही मिसिङ छ भने त्यो मात्रै मिसिङ हो नेप्लिज एन्टरप्रेनर्सहरू नेपाल बाहिर राम्रै गरिरहेका छन् If I see the banking sector, you have done a good job. You have probably contributed to sell this economy from virtual collapse to survival strength, survival level. किन हामी गएनौँ भनेर धेरैले तपाईले सोध्नुभयो नि कसरी बाँच्यौँ हामी भूकम्पमा बाँच्यौँ भारतको इकोनोमिक ब्लकेटबाट पनि बाँच्यौँ त्यो बाँच्नुको पछाडि हाम्रो ताकत थियो काम गर्ने रेजिलियन्स गर्ने लागिरहने काममा खटिरहने थियो त्यसकारणले ब्याङ्करहरूलाई त म धन्यवाद दिन्छु मैले हेरेको लास्ट 10 इयर्समा दाजु ब्याङ्किङ र फाइनेन्सियल सर्भिस मार्केटमा सबैभन्दा बढी इन्भेस्टमेन्ट भएको छ The largest investment from private sector has gone to that sector. त्यसकारणले अब नेक्स्ट भनेको के हो भने तपाईहरुले यसरी कलेक्ट गर्नु भएको यो रिसोर्सलाई अब प्रोडक्सन सेक्टरमा म्यानुफ्याक्चरिङ सेक्टरमा फ्लो गर्ने हो कन्जम्सनमा मात्रै गर्ने होइन हाम्रो एउटा पोलिसी रिभर्सल के चाहियो भने यो रिफर्मको एउटा एजेन्डा how to make it possible that industries will survive and how banking sector can facilitate investment in production sector त्यो मलाई लाग्छ एउटा महत्त्वपूर्ण च्यालेन्ज हो त्यसको लागि इन्डस्ट्रियल इकोसिस्टम चाहियो which is missing in this country त्यो इन्डस्ट्रियल इकोसिस्टमको लागि लोकल लेभलको पालिकाहरू गाउँपालिका र नगरपालिका बनाउन सायद महानगरपालिका लगायत अनि त्यसपछि केन्द्र सरकार अब प्रोभिन्सको के हुन्छ मलाई थाहा भएन त्यो विद्वानहरूलाई थाहा हो प्रोभिन्समा न त्यो बाघको जस्तो नङ्ग्रा छ न हात्तीको जस्तो सुँड छ त्यो के हो मैले बुझेको छैन त्यो अब अलि विद्वानहरूले बुझाउनु होला त्यसमा ताकत कम देखिएको छ कम्तीमा पनि अहिले पालिकामा ताकत छ केन्द्र सरकारमा ताकत छ त्यसलाई मिलाउन सकियो भने नेपालमा औद्योगिक व्यवसायको नेक्स्ट लेभल चाहिँ हामी लान सक्छौँ र मलाई लाग्छ अहिलेको रिफर्म चाहिँ यो खालमा यो दुईटा पेरिफेरीमा लिबरलाइजिङ फाइनेन्सियल सर्भिस मार्केट गिभिङ देम अपर्च्युनिटी टु ग्रो एन्ड एक्सप्यान्ड टु नेबरिङ मार्केट्स मैले हेरेको 4 वर्ष अगाडि राष्ट्रिय वाणिज्य ब्याङ्कको कुनै एउटा प्रोग्राम भएको थियो सम्माननीय राष्ट्रपति आउनु भएको थियो त्यो बेला मैले विनम्रतापूर्वक अनुरोध गरेको थिएँ राष्ट्रिय वाणिज्य ब्याङ्क सरकारी ब्याङ्क हो यसलाई म्यानमारमा जान दिउँ म त्यही वर्ष म्यानमार गएको थिएँ म्यानमारमा चेक पनि नदिने ब्याङ्कहरू चिठी लेखेर एप्लिकेसन लेखेर पैसा दिनुपर्ने ब्याङ्कहरू थिए नेपाली ब्याङ्कले त चेक दिइरहेछ नि यहाँ त सहकारीको पनि चेक छ त्यो खालको एउटा इनोभेटिभ अप्रोच लिएर नेपालको ब्याङ्क गएको भए दे कुड हेभ सक्सिडेड मेड ह्युज मेरो विचारमा इन्टरनेसनली एउटा इम्प्याक्ट पार्ने काम नेपालको ब्याङ्कले गर्न सक्थ्यो अब 4 वर्ष ढिलो भइसक्यो अहिले त थाइल्यान्डका सिङ्गापुरका मलेसियाका कम्पनीहरू आएर सबै मार्केट भरिसक्यो वी लस्ट अपर्च्युनिटी यो बाहिर जान दिउँ र तेस्रो फन्डामेन्टल चाहिँ नेपालीहरूको हाम्रो माइन्डसेट काम नगरी नखाने मेहनत गर्ने इमान्दार हुनेमा हामी जाउँ हामी सफल हुन्छौँ धन्यवाद
धन्यवाद छ म यो हाम्रो कन्भर्सेसनमा मलाई के लाग्यो भने नेपालमा सबैभन्दा ठुलो ट्रस्टको ग्याप छ एउटा चाहिँ सेक्टर भनौँ अथवा बिजनेस सेक्टर भनौँ एक अर्कोले चाहिँ ट्रस्ट त्यति चाहिँ पाइएको छैन र अर्को कुरा के भने हाम्रो भएको रुपी पर रुपी एक्सपेन्डिचरलाई त्यसलाई प्रोडक्टिभिटी कसरी बढाउने भन्ने ठुलो च्यालेन्जको रूपमा छ कहिलेकाहीँ ठाउँमा व्यापार व्यवसायलाई पनि के चार्ज छ भनेदेखि बढी ट्रेडमा बिजनेसमा इन्भल्भ भएर हामी डिइन्डस्ट्रियलाइजेसन चाहिँ हामीले आफै सुरु गऱ्यौँ र हामी बढी चाहिने व्यापार औद्योगिक भन्दा पनि व्यापारमा लाग्यौँ भन्ने कुराहरू छ
थट प्रोभोकिङ अफ कोर्स थियो यो प्यानल र हामी सबैको तर्फबाट अत्यन्तै हार्दिकता एवं कृतज्ञताका साथ यो सानो स्मृति चिन्ह हामी प्रदान गर्दैछौँ सर्वप्रथम डाक्टर शङ्कर शर्मा वरिष्ठ अर्थविद एवं पूर्व उपाध्यक्ष राष्ट्रिय योजना आयोगका त्यस्तै श्री हरिभक्त शर्माज्यू सिएनआईका पूर्व अध्यक्ष एवं उद्योग व्यवसायी त्यस्तै मोडरेटर श्री अनलराज भट्टराईज्यू र डाक्टर विमल कोइरालाज्यू पूर्व मुख्य सचिव नेपाल सरकारका पुनः एकपटक हामी सबैको तर्फबाट यस अत्यन्तै महत्त्वपूर्ण संवाद र यो छलफलको लागि